Hi, everybody. Welcome to the March meeting. Gary is actually a cousin by marriage to me, and I've known what he's done. And then last summer, we happened to be talking in Rhode Island at his in-laws, and he was getting into more detail, and I thought a lot of the stuff would be fascinating for some of the group here. So I'm really glad that you're able to come, Gary. Gary's a Master Sergeant in the U.S. Air Force Reserves, based at the Westover Air Reserve Base in Chicopee, Massachusetts. He's been a flight engineer on the C-5 Galaxy transport for 12 years and works full-time as an instructor flight engineer as a civil servant, a position that is linked to his role in the reserves. Gary's total time in service is 19 years, 11 of which was active duty time. He's going to be discussing the role the reserves are playing in current operations, the impacts of technology on job skills, and a comparison of pay and benefits relative to 20 years ago. He's also going to delve a little bit deeper into actually what his job does. So Gary, we're happy to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll try not to create a shadow back there. And I've got my little outline so I can keep myself on track. I'd like to start with a little anecdote. A platoon sergeant and a platoon leader were bunking in the field for the night. The sergeant asked the platoon leader, he says, "When you look at the stars, what do you think, sir?" And the lieutenant replies, "Well, I think of how insignificant we are in the universe. I think of what a small piece we are in the grand design. I can't help but think that, you know, if what we do really matters, or if it makes a difference." And he goes, "Why, Sergeant? What do you think?" And the sergeant replies, "I think someone stole the darn tent." Speaking of small part in big design, when I was in high school before I joined the service, I remember I worked at a pizza restaurant. I worked with a guy named Pancho. We call him Pancho. He's one of those easygoing biker philosophical guys. And he says, when he found out that I was going to join the service, he says, "You know, you're not going to be much more than a coin in the military slot machine." And those words kind of stuck with me through the years. And I said, well, looking back now, I feel like my coin's been a lucky one. So anyhow, today I want to talk about what Leslie said. In addition to that, I'm going to give you some more information about Westover, its history, current numbers like statistics on demographics and that sort of thing with Westover. I'm going to talk more about the C-5, its history, how it came into being, what the service uses the C-5 for, and the future of the C-5. It being, you know, a very large military transport aircraft. I'm going to talk about my story, you know, how I joined the military and what I've done since, and what my plans are for the future, along with the role of the reserves and pay and benefits and technology. And I'm going to give you a little demonstration as far as technology goes about, you know, how my job personally is impacted by our adoption of technology. So that being said, I'm going to move on. I'm going to read some things from a source that I got about the base, and it's going to be kind of windy. I'm going to try to minimize it a little bit as far as the boredom factor. All right. So Westover Air Reserve Base was established in 1940, and since then it has been the home of several military units, Army, Air Force, and even today it serves as a joint use. We've got 10 tenant Army units. We've got 4 Marine units and 2 Navy units that are fighting alongside the Air Force Reserves. A little bit of history about some of the airframes that were there. Westover was a launching point for the heroic Berlin airlift, and I talked to a gentleman that was familiar with that episode, for 327 days during the Soviet blockade. Altogether, 276,000 flights by C-47s and C-54s were flown, bringing an average of 1 ton of supplies and food to each Berlin resident. So that was a significant point in Westover's history. The 99th Bombardment Wing moved from Fairchild Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington to Westover in 1956, and that thus began the operation of the B-52 Stratofortress bomber. The 99th Bomb Wing kept bombers and tankers on ground alert at all times, and the Strategic Air Command crews lived on 24-hour alerts for 2 weeks at a time. The 348th Bombardment Squadron operated the B-52 from December 56 through April of 72 while at Westover. 1977, Strategic Air Command leadership turned the base over to the reserves. It's still actually the largest reserve base by landmass in the United States. From that time until October of 1987, the 439th Tactical Air Wing operated C-130 Hercules and C-123 Provider aircraft. The wing converted to C-5 Galaxies in 1987 and eventually became designated the 439th Airlift Wing. It continues to operate in that capacity. Westover has a vision statement is leaders in excellence. That language resonates in pretty much everything that we do every day. Speaking of language, we're all familiar with some of the military language that we use, that military tends to use, terms like squared away and carried on. Some of the other ones would be, we've got your six, and the ever-present excessive use of acronyms. However, I think the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Army all bicker because we don't precisely speak the same language. For instance, consider the term secure the building. How does the Army interpret that? The Army will post guards around the building. The Navy will shut off the lights, lock the doors. The Marine Corps will go in, kill everybody, and set up a headquarters. How does the Air Force interpret that? Well, they're going to lease the property with an option to buy. Okay. C-5 Galaxy. Has anyone ever seen the C-5 Galaxy in motion? Has anyone flown on the C-5 Galaxy? No. How many Air Force do we have here?
Hours in the rear end of the thing.
Yeah, in the troop compartment. Army? How many Army? No, one Army? Navy? Marine Corps? No Marine Corps. All right. Coast Guard. I forgot the Coast Guard. How could I forget the Coast Guard? Okay, C-5 Galaxy. Just to give you some size parameters, it's 247 feet long. So it's practically the size of a football field. Wingspan's 222 feet. Height of the T-tail, 65 feet. Entered service in 1969. I'm going to kind of do the same thing that I did with the...
the nose which drops down for loading and unloading?
Yes, it does have some unique characteristics, and we actually have some photographs in here. I'm probably not going to reference the wording here, so we can just... So what John is talking about is the loading capability of the airplane, and that piece that flips up the nose of the airplane, it's called the visor. It flips up 90 degrees just like that, and it enables, it facilitates the loading of rolling stock like that helicopter or anything else with wheels, really. I'm going to press on with the Lockheed C-5 Galaxy background. So here's how it came to be. It's been operated since 1969. It's participated in all major conflicts, including the Vietnam, Iraq, Yugoslavia, and Afghanistan, the Gulf War, NATO operations, and it supports disaster relief, humanitarian aid, and U.S. Space Shuttle program. Okay, upon completion of testing in December of 1969, the first C-5A was transferred to the Transitional Training Unit at Eltis Air Force Base in Oklahoma. Lockheed delivered the first operational Galaxy to the 437th Airlift Wing in Charleston, South Carolina in June of 1970. It had some pretty exceptional cost overruns. I think it was the first program to hit the $1 billion cost overrun mark, so it's got that dubious distinction.
Who was the builder?
Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin. In fact, Lockheed ran into some trouble during the development, and U.S. provided loans to keep it going. During static and fatigue testing, cracks were noticed in the wings. Therefore, it necessitated a $1.5 billion wing upgrade for the fleet. 76 C-5s got new wings at that point. And that installation took place from 1980 to 1987. And those are C-5A models. So as part of President Ronald Reagan's military policy, funding was made available for the expansion of the airlift capability of the country. The C-17 program, still some time in the making. Congress approved funding for a C-5B in July of 1982. The first C-5B was delivered to Eltis Air Force Base in '86, and the last in '89, Westover receiving their 16 aircraft in '87. Sir?
With regard to your third bullet point there, what is the actual length of the runway Westover, and what are the two larger ones or longer ones?
That is an excellent question. The length of the runway is 11,597 feet. That's the long runway at Westover. It's got a shorter runway as well, intersecting runway. I believe the longest is down at
Wouldn't it be Lackland?
Patrick.
Lackland or Kelly? When I was down there,
Yeah.
I know C-5s flew out of Lackland.
They still do, yeah.
I'd sit at the end of the runway and I'd be like, how is that going to get off the ground? The wings
Yeah.
are like this far.
It's
It
a
just
poetry in motion,
amazing.
isn't it? From a distance, it
Amazing
does not
aircraft.
look like it defies gravity almost. It almost looks like a
Beautiful.
defiance of physics. But Kelly still operates C-5s. I'm not quite sure how long. This references the East Coast, so I don't know. Actually, I have an app for that. I can tell you the various I can tell you the various runway information across the world. All at the power of my fingertips there. But I believe that Patrick, down in Florida, Cocoa Beach, where the NASA shuttle is, I think that's the longest on the East Coast. Dover,
Well, that
you'd have to go
makes sense,
you'd have to go
but
farther
you got
south.
the shuttle coming
The
in
shuttle,
there.
and it's a primary recovery for the shuttle. So.
That's probably what kept Westover active is
The length of the runway.
runway. And the other thing is with the B-52s, I think the landing pad of the runway is something like 8 feet of concrete. It's very, very thick.
It needs to be, yes,
And I think,
tremendously thick, yeah.
Westover got the C-5As very early, Jim might remember too, very early in the 1980s.
Got the C5s, because they had 130s up until 80, they got them in 87.
Well, they actually overlapped. They had
Yeah.
both 130s.
And the C5s at the same time,
They
right?
got rid of the 123s, I think.
Yeah, and that very well may be true. And based on what I've read and just people I've talked to, it doesn't really clarify on that point, but it's certainly a tremendous aircraft.
Otis is 12,000 feet.
Otis is 12, okay, so
Keep going.
okay, so that's where it's been, the history of the C5, where it's going. The C5 continues to receive funding for upgrades. All of our aircraft have been upgraded to comply with global air traffic management standards. So basically, all the avionics on the aircraft have been upgraded from analog to all digital. We have all digital glass cockpit displays. It's not fly-by-wire, but it's coming. So that'll be the next upgrade, which I'll talk about here. It's called the Reliability Enhancement and Re-engineering Program, the RERP. You may have heard about it in the news. Dover's fleet actually has, they just stood up an operational C5M model. All of their aircraft, or those 16, have been modified by the CF6 engine. So it's been complied with, and here's a little bit, a couple of tidbits on what that does for our capability. It includes new General Electric CF6 engines, pylons, auxiliary power units, upgrades to the aircraft skin and frame, landing gear, cockpit, and pressurization systems. The CF6 engine produces 22% more thrust. So the current TF-39 engine installed on the aircraft produces 43,000 pounds of thrust. The CF6 will produce 50,000 pounds of thrust from each engine, providing a 30% shorter takeoff, a 38% higher climb rate to initial altitude, and increased cargo load and longer range. So overall fuel savings, I guess, is ultimately what we're shooting for.
What? Max?
Maximum takeoff weight for the C5M or B is 840,000 pounds.
840,000
pounds. Yep. So obviously cargo and fuel will, depending on where it's got to go, less fuel, more cargo, short distance. Dry weight of the airplane, the operating weight is about 300.
In tons, is that 420 tons?
Times 2,000, yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of weight, yeah. And
56 tires.
it requires a long runway. Westover is a good place for that. Actually, 28 tires. So 24 main landing gear tires to distribute the weight. So actually, it's got a smaller footprint than a C-130 as far as weight per tire, because it's spread out. And then you've got 4 nose landing gear tires. I'm actually going to talk a little bit. I had some videos available that I have a link in here for it, landing gear video, and it's quite remarkable, the landing gear, what it does as far as taxiing on the ground, maneuvering the airplane, and being such a big airplane, and what it can do, and also after it takes off. So the video demonstrates what the landing gear does as it's maneuvering on the ground, and then it continues through the takeoff roll and after liftoff, and it shows the gear retraction. So unfortunately, we don't have internet capability, so that link is not going to work.
For those that with internet, I can send this link out.
Yeah, it's available on YouTube, and even if you just wanted to do a search, you can go to YouTube and just type in C5 landing gear, and it'll be one of the top choices. So a little bit more on the C5 RERP. It's a $1.44 billion upgrade to the fleet. What do they get for that $1.44 billion? An estimated $20 billion in savings over time. Over the next 40 years, the U.S. Air Force estimates the C5M will save over $20 billion. The first C5M conversion was completed in May 2005. The test began in Dobbins Air Reserve Base in 2006. And like I mentioned, the Dover Airlift Squadron at Dover just completed their 16 aircraft upgrades, so they're operational. Okay. Let me see. So I've got a sheet here that just has 15 fast facts that was made available to me by the Public Affairs Office. And I just want to see if there's anything here about the airplane. All right, we talked about the Westover being the largest by land mass air reserve base in the military. It's a joint use field. It's actually a center for major C5 inspections for the fleet. Oh, here it is. Westover is a vital inspection center for the nation's entire fleet of C5s coming to our isochronal inspection dock. And that just happened for Westover just a couple of years ago, where it's a regionalized isochronal inspection, so C5s from all over the country will come to Westover for their isochronal inspections. So, all right. Of course, when I grew up in the Air Force as a C-17 mechanic, so I never thought I'd wind up on C-5s. I joined the service in 1995. I was born in Hartford, moved to Manchester and enlisted out of Manchester. Joined the military thinking this would be a great way to go to college, because I didn't have much of any other prospects going on at the time. So I enlisted up through Springfield with the guaranteed career field of electronics. I wanted to work in electronics. So I went off to boot camp, 1995, down in Lackland. graduated BMT, and at that point I was given a list of jobs and said, hey, they said pick 3, and we can't guarantee you anything, but we'll try to get you at least an electronic field. So one of those jobs happened to be a C-17 electronics, electrical and environmental systems specialist, and that's what I wound up being. So my first duty assignment, I continued on to tech school in Texas. My first duty assignment was Charleston, South Carolina. I worked as a C-17 mechanic down there for 3.5 years. And then in 1999, the C-17s were spreading at that point. So Charleston had, when I got there, about 12 airframes, a C-17, and they also had 141s. I went out as initial cadre to McCord Air Force Base in Washington and stayed there for another 3.5 years. And we started getting C-17s quite rapidly. We got C-17s at the pace of about 1 per month while I was there. And when I left, we had about 35 or so, and now I think they're up to about 40. I departed Washington with the intention of joining the reserves and going to college at that point. So I came back to the East Coast, enrolled in college, courtesy of the U.S. government. The VA has fantastic educational benefits, and they've gotten even better since I used them, to the point where it makes a lot of sense to take it, to join the military specifically for education benefits. So in the event that you're counseling a young person that doesn't know exactly what they want to do, that's a pretty decent path to take. They can join, they can do a few years of active duty and reap a tremendous amount of benefit as far as paying for college. In fact, my college was fully paid for. I joined the reserve unit 2002 at Westover, went off to training at Altus Air Force Base on C-5 to be a flight engineer. It took me about 1.5 years to complete the upgrade training, and once I finished the training, I went to college. So I bounced around colleges because I moved quite a bit, but ultimately graduated in 2008 with a finance degree out of Central Connecticut. And I'm married. I have 2 daughters. My wife, Lisa, actually works here in Cheshire. She's worked here for about 25 years. And my daughters are 12 and 7. So that's pretty much, how things went for me. And I definitely feel like I've been very fortunate to be a part of the Air Force, to kind of take advantage of the situation and be able to take advantage of the programs as well. I've worked with a lot of really, really great people, and I continue to work with great people. Anyone that's ever been a part of a reserve unit can testify to the fact that people tend to stick around for a long time in the reserves. In fact, my chief that's been in about 33 years, he's just going to retire this year. We've got probably the average age in our section alone for flight engineers is about 45, thereabouts. So definitely people stick around. And I actually plan on doing my best to stick around as well, even if it means I leave my full-time position as an air reserve technician and just kind of stay on as a reservist. So that would work out well. I'm a flight engineer on C-5. I don't think I have any photographs of the actual panel, but to summarize what it is I do on the C-5, well, let me walk you through how a typical mission would go for us. A mission is planned to bring X amount of cargo from point A to point B, and they task, say Westover to do that. So we assign a crew to that mission, and the crew would get alerted for the morning that they're scheduled to fly. We get alerted, we brief, the aircraft commander briefs the crew, and then the enlisted pretty much go out to the airplane while the pilots do the flight planning. And the flight engineers will pre-flight the interior and exterior of the aircraft. Pilots flight plan, cargo is loaded if there's any by the loadmasters. They also do a pre-flight. Our pre-flight consists of operational checking the entire aircraft, really. I mean, all systems, hydraulic systems, fuel systems, environmental, communication systems, flight controls. Those are all things that get checked by the flight engineer. After the pre-flight's complete, the pilots show up at the airplane, and we start running checklists. The flight engineer has a station on the flight deck, which is rare nowadays. Actually, we're what's considered a dying breed. Not many civilian prospects for being a flight engineer anymore. So military is really it for flight engineers. We occupy a station on the flight station, and we pretty much operate fuel, hydraulics, electrics, air conditioning, and we calculate performance data. We read checklists, and we secure the plane after landing, and we run emergency procedures as they arise, which on the C5 isn't all that uncommon. The role of the reserves is quite different now than it was some time ago. In fact, the reserves play a tremendous role in the total force concept that the military has adopted over the past couple of years. I just want to run down a list of missions that the reserves run. Aerial firefighting, aerial port, aerial spray, aeromedical evacuation. We have an aeromedical evacuation unit up at Westover. Air Operations Center, which is basically planning. Airborne warning and control systems, airlift, bomber, combat camera, cyberspace, fighters, in-flight refueling, personnel recovery, pilot training, security forces, space, special operations forces, and unmanned aerial surveillance and interdiction, UAVs.
What is personnel recovery?
SEER operations, combat SEER, search and rescue.
Oh, okay.
Any questions so far? I'll open it up to questions also at the end of it, but.
How many crew members in the C5?
The C5 basic crew consists of 2 pilots, 2 flight engineers, and that's the minimum required to fly the airplane. Now, if you're going to have passengers or cargo, you'll have to carry load masters as well. So typically, a mission crew consists of 3 pilots, 2 flight engineers, and about 3 load masters. So we're talking anywhere from 8 to 12 if you include the flying crew chiefs that we sometimes fly with. Sir?
On your Galaxy, when you're taking your loads in, do you have a load master that distributes how the cargo should be in the thing?
We do. Based on a load plan, they ensure that the cargo, as it comes out to the aircraft, is configured properly to maintain limitations as far as CG goes. But yeah, they definitely play a part in that.
Is that on your crew, or is that coming from the headquarters?
That would be on our crew.
On the crew?
On our crew, yep.
Gary,
Sir?
We have a load master here, Air Force load master here in Cheshire, although he's moved recently. Maybe you know of him, Mark Farrington. Ever heard of him?
Was he at Westover? Was he at Westover?
Yes.
He was at Westover.
Yes.
He might have been before my time up there. Farrington? No.
The loading, years ago, used to have that little, like a slide rule or chart sort of thing. It's all computerized now.
Yeah. Oh, to figure weight and balance?
Wait,
I actually have an app for that as well. Yeah. Sir?
What's the greatest distance that aircraft could fly fully loaded?
Fully loaded. That's a good question too. I've got a statement here, authorized statements here. It says the largest military aircraft in the U.S. and is capable of carrying 270,000 pounds up to 6,000 miles. Okay, distance is relative to, weight, max weight and conditions, headwind, tailwind, that sort of thing. I can tell you that if you consider aerial refueling capabilities that we have, we can fly indefinitely. Assuming that it's properly planned and we'd be limited at that point to the crew. What can the crew endure? Do we have a big enough crew to be able to legally do it without exceeding our max duty days and so on? My longest flight to date, 17.5-hour flight from Yokota to Washington, D.C. That was a presidential support mission. That was a double AR, double air refueling. So, long time in flight.
That 17 and a half was at what average speed?
0.77 Mach. So about
In
500 on the ground, 500 miles per hour. Yeah.
one thing, now, correct me if my figures are wrong, but C5A's got 36 pallet positions.
Mm-hmm.
And the pallets are 108 or 9 foot square. The 130s had
Six.
16, was it?
No, not 16.
No, less than that?
Yeah, they were single row. I think there were
8?
6 or 8, yeah.
And the 123s had 3 pallet
They had
positions.
3.
Yeah.
Wow. So we've had vastly enhanced cargo carrying capability with the C5. The 17, I think, has about 24 or 26 pallet positions. Pay and benefits. Can anyone recall what pay looked like when they were receiving an LES from the military?
How long
Hey.
ago are you talking?
Any time frame. I've got numbers from 1970, so I'll run some numbers by you.
Ensign in the Navy, 01 pay grade, 1961, $222.30 a month.
$222 a month. Yeah. Anyone else remember? I mean, that's. I printed up some pay charts from 1970, and then I printed up a pay chart every 10 years since. And basically, I just highlighted somebody in my position. An E7 with 18 years in, per the chart. 1970, my monthly salary in active duty was $597. Of course, this is just basic pay. It's not counting the housing, subsistence allowance, or anything like that.
Combat?
Combat, none of that, none of that. Fast forward 1980, E7 over 18 years, $1,203. So from 1970 to 1980, that's 101.6% increase. All right, 1990, same story, $1,848. That's an increase in 53.5% from 1980. Fast forward yet again to 2000.
43, $50.
$50.
And no place to spend it.
2000, $2,566 basic pay. That's an increase of 38.8% from 1990. 2010, $4,085.70, 59.2% increase from 2000. 2014, this year, $4,323.90. E7, 18 years. Just as an overall snapshot, that's a 624% increase from 1970. And that's approximately, based on the calculator that I used online, a 4.6% compound rate of return. So military pay and benefits has definitely advanced some.
If you get paid, right?
What's that?
If you get paid.
That's assuming the government doesn't shut down.
Right.
This is for you to look forward to. I believe my monthly retirement pay is slightly greater than what I made
When you were,
going up there on weekends and man days and
Yep.
everything else per month.
oh, that's fantastic. I did an annual inflation by decade, and for comparison purposes, basically it just gives you a long-term rate of long-term inflation rate using the geometric mean or the compound annual growth rate, 3.22% inflation rate long-term from 1913 to 2013. Now I understand that the numbers are probably going to be a little skewed because my numbers only go back 1970 on, and this goes back to 1913. And if you look at the chart, the first 4 or 5 decades were either negative or very low, and then in 1970 it ramped up quite a bit. So, but I'd say that military pay and compensation has definitely kept pace with inflation, if not beat it by a little bit.
They still maintain that 4 hours a month. You have to have light skins.
Yes, yes, you have basic, and I have a dual requirement. I have a civilian and a military, so I've got a lot.
All the colonels and fat generals and all that. At the end of the month, they have to get their 4 hours in so they can sit in the co-pilot seat and get
Yeah.
the 4 hours in.
Yeah,
On the flight engineer during World War II and beyond was 2750 was the flight engineer's MOS. Then the B-29s come out, and they called them panel engineers. I don't know if they still call them. That was a 737. That was an officer position in the
Yeah.
on that side. And what's your MOS?
I'm a 1 Alpha 1. 1 Alpha 1 X1, so I'm a 7 level, 1 Alpha 1, 7 1.
And you're still a flight engineer?
Still flight engineer. Yeah, fixed wing flight engineer. Sure.
How long will it take the pre-flight, before takeoff?
Typically about an hour and 45 minutes.
An hour and 45. Are your engines constantly running all that time?
No,
Or,
no. We have auxiliary power units, APUs, basically engines that we operate just for supplying electrical power and bleed air to operate our hydraulics and air conditioning.
and what altitude is your, basically your
35,000 feet.
4,500?
35,000.
30?
Yeah, that's on average where we cruise.
Because we see a lot of planes coming over the state, and their vapor trails are way up there.
Mm-hmm.
And they look like they're about 60, 65,000 feet. Am I
Sure.
wrong, or is that right? They're high, it looks like they're bombers
Yeah,
at that altitude?
it would have to be, it certainly wouldn't be a cargo or any type of wide body or transporter. The highest that I've ever been in the C5 was 41,000 feet. And our cabin altitude at that point was 9,000. And we won't go much past there because at 10,000 feet, cabin altitude, we're required to wear oxygen. Yeah. Sir?
Here, would you speak about the B-52? Did you say that Otis was a SAC base at one point?
Westover.
Yeah.
I did. I can
What are the dimensions of a B-52 compared to?
compare to the C5. I don't know. I'd have to check my phone on that one.
Got an app for that.
Yeah, I can find an app for that. But the wingspan is probably pretty comparable. It's got 8 engines versus the 4, and we've actually have a few of our pilots used to be buff pilots, so I can probably get some more information and get it to you if you'd like.
I was in a B-52 at Westover,
Yeah.
and the only way I ever got into one was when they had an open house. Other than that, I couldn't get near them.
Mhm.
But anyway, when you get up into the cockpit of a B-52, you think you're sitting in a rocket ship or something. It was very tight and very small. You get up in the cockpit of this thing, and it's like being in your living room.
Oh yeah, you definitely can't beat the comfort for the crew. You can measure it in square footage, and it's probably the size of a decent apartment.
When was
Sir.
excuse me, one more question.
Yeah.
When was the 52 phased out, and where are they now?
Um,
Desert somewhere?
No, they still operate out of Barksdale down in Louisiana,
Oh.
and I believe out of North Dakota. So they're still operating.
I know it varies. Fuel consumption on the C5.
Fuel costs are
Consumption
very
per hour.
consumption per hour. Yeah. So at cruise, we burn about 24,000 pounds per hour. 6.8 pounds per gallon. So that's probably 6.8 pounds per gallon.
Gasoline is.
So you're talking about 4,000 gallons per hour. Yeah, it's substantial.
Are you familiar with this new change they're gonna make up at Bradley, where they're gonna take the Warhawks squadron out and they're gonna bring transports in? Now, they didn't say what type transports, but they said it was gonna be a service base rather than a, I don't know if you heard about that, or can you tell us anything
They're
about
already
that?
there.
I can tell you that C-130s will be flying out of there. I don't know how many they're getting. I have seen 130s flying training missions, like local training patterns up there. Actually, one of our flight engineers left C5 and went to fly C-130s down there. So, yeah, 130s. 130s will be the airframe.
Do you utilize the hangars up there, Westover? I remember we could squeeze in
Yeah.
5 C-54s there. Can you get a galaxy there?
You know the row of, from base hangar all the way down the row?
9.
All the way down to 9. Those are not utilized for aircraft parking anymore. For instance, the maintenance squadron operates out of hangar 9. As you work your way back, the aerial port is out of hangar 3.
Oh, they moved it, it used to be 7.
Yeah, yep, they moved it. So it's, you got the base hangar, fire department, hangar 3, aerial port operates out of that one. Hangar 5, life support, other, other type functions. You got sheet metal shop, machine shop, that sort of thing, back shop. So yeah, we use them, but not for parking airplanes.
Well, how do you cover the, when they're doing maintenance on engines and stuff?
We have, down the end of that row, we've got 3 hangars. We've got a pull-through hangar that you can completely park a C5 in. That's the wash rack. We've got a fuel dock right next to it. And then the ISO inspection that I mentioned earlier, the regionalized where all the C5s come in, those are there. They're able to be fully enclosed now. Up until about a year and a half ago, that wasn't the case, but they built an enclosure for the tail that opens and closes separately from the doors. So that's able to, and that was a pretty, the tail used to poke right out, so now it's enclosed. So that works out well for the maintainers.
Yeah, Westover was a B-24, last place the planes landed, they went to Greenland, Norway, that's Canada, and so, in Europe, and B-17, that was it.
Yeah. Westover, lots of reasons why it's valuable. The long runway. Strategically, it's that much closer to Europe. So that's got some.
Considered a gateway.
Yeah. One last tidbit, kind of going along with what you said about your retirement pay relative to when you were doing that. A UTA, reservists operate by UTAs and annual tours. You have that minimum UTA requirement every year, the 15 days of annual tour every year. A UTA consists of individual periods. So over the course of 2 days on a weekend, there will be 4 periods, and basically that's 4 paydays. My LES recently was equivalent to the monthly paycheck of 1970, right around the same. So 4 days of work today matched 1970 monthly salary. So I thought that was interesting. Was there another question, sir?
Are they gonna have another open house there? They used to have open houses up there.
Yes. There's going to be another air show soon, in the next year or 2, I believe. So funding permitting.
Are there, do the Russians have anything larger than this?
The Antonov 224, I think, is slightly larger.
They landed at
25.
Bradley about
Yeah,
15 years ago.
Mm.
It was big.
that's a behemoth. Yeah. But it's comparable. I think it's just a little bit bigger. Technology. How are we using technology? There was a time when I first came in 19 years ago where you showed up to work and you had roll call. You went to roll call and they took attendance and you were given your workload for the day and off you went. Now we don't have roll call anymore. We have a guy showing up to the office. He sets up in front of a computer. He checks his email. He checks his training requirements using one of the programs that we use to track all of the training requirements, and that's how he knows what to do for the training period. In addition to those things, email and that, we call it PACS, the training database, we've transitioned to virtual almost everything. Orders writing system is all done virtually through a program called Arrows. VMPF covers all of our personnel issues. You need a DD-214 printed out. You used to go to the VMPF to get it printed out. Now you can just go online and do it. So really, the MPF serves to provide ID cards, things like that for, say, retirees or present duty folks. But for the most part, all of those functions that I remember going to other agencies for are all done online. Education, tracking and monitoring, that's all done online. EPR writing, enlisted performance reports, that's all submitted and done online. I mean, it's really gotten to a point now where you jump on a computer and you can really do most everything you need to do as far as administration goes, and then go out to the airplane and fly. So I mean, it's really gotten quite cool, sometimes cumbersome when systems crash. You know, basically the world comes to a stop. So, sir?
I have a question. It's like you have a 7 o'clock departure. When is your day start?
We get alerted 4 hours, 15 minutes prior to departure time. So it gives us an hour to get there, and then 3 hours to get the airplane ready to go.
For the ladies in the audience, how many female pilots flying that?
I
I know it's quite a few.
I've got a demographic sheet for that. Let me see if I can find it. It's mixed in here somewhere. It gave me a bunch of percentage. Oh, here it is. Okay. The base itself consists of total service 233 officers, 2,361. Now, this is just Air Force Reserve, not counting the tenant units and the civilians and so on. Rated officers, 12% of them are pilots, 1.7% are female pilots. So, 86% male, 24% female overall. And then some more numbers. If you're interested, you can certainly take a look afterwards. Okay, so I brought this in because I wanted to demonstrate what I have to carry every time I go out to the airplane. It's kind of raggy, but it gets the job done. This is all my flight publications. So I wanted to, it's about 50 pounds worth of pubs that we have to carry on the C5. This contains all the systems information. That's called the Dash 1, Section 1. Here is all the checklists, expanded checklist. Emergency procedures are all in Section 3. Those are the barber pole. And then we've got operating limitations as well in that one. So that's the Dash 1. And then we've got a 1-4, which encompasses the avionics upgrade that we just went through in the past 10 years. So, and this finishes out the bunch. This is the performance manual. This has all the charts that we use to compute takeoff and landing data, cruise, climb, descent. So altogether, 50 pounds worth. And we have some additional AFIs, instructions, regulations that we have to be familiar with as well. Now, we got issued iPads. We got issued iPads last year, and very soon these are going to replace all of that. So I'll go out to an airplane with this guy. And this contains not only all of that information, but a whole bunch more. It's got every regulation, every form, every piece of paper that I need to operate the C5 with and reference throughout the course of business. In addition to, it's got what's called it's called the Faro program, but it's got the DoD flips, the flight information publications, and it contains airport information, approaches, departures, worldwide. It's got it all.
Chinese got one too?
I'm sure they do. They've got their.
How much in your bag that's missing that's classified that you couldn't leave the base with? That's got to add a few pounds to it.
We don't. I don't carry any secret stuff. That's all. The pilots handle that. They get the secrets out of base ops before we depart on any.
They depart.
Yep, and then it's very controlled before they. Yeah. So.
All your data there, those 5 notebooks is unclassified. Unclassified, open public information.
You might be able to find it.
You might find some.
You might. Yeah, you might be able to find it. I mean, it's out there. I'm sure you'd find it on the internet if you looked hard enough. So.
And those can't be hacked, can this?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why one of the big missions in the Air Force now is cyber awareness, cyberspace, cyber defense. It's huge. You know, we've had to, because we've saved ourselves so much work by going to technology. Now we've had to build up, you know, a whole nother regime to help counteract the benefit that we gained.
And you gotta hope it doesn't crash.
and hope your battery doesn't die.
Because I know just
Yeah.
at work when something happens.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
You might
that's-
as well go home because there's nothing you can do without it.
Yeah, that's the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
With
risk.
all this here information
Yeah.
here, and we go out tonight, and we sit down in front of a TV, there's always some guy giving his opinion what happened to the airliner. With all your experience,
Yeah.
what's your opinion of what happened?
Ooh,
You're on TV.
yeah. Well, I can
Confirm nor deny.
I can say that after the second day, when they haven't received any word on anything, my first thought was it's at the bottom of the ocean. I mean, with so many people with so much technology that they carry with them, if it landed anywhere on land, if you had any survivors, you know, or the wreckage would have been found at some point, you know, relatively quickly. So I have no idea what could have happened. I mean, it could have been that the crew was overcome with fumes or something, and just the airplane just flew until it ran out of gas. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With all the conflicts all over the world, can you tell us of any of your squadron going to Afghanistan or Germany or anything, and the supplies that they might be running in with?
Yeah, we have continuing operations. We have weekly missions that head that direction. In addition to that, we support, even today, humanitarian missions where we transport, you know, food supplies and so on to Central America.
Do you go and stay, or do you just drop it off and come back?
Drop it off and leave, you know. And just get fuel if you need to, and then depart. Sure.
Two things, if I may. Well, Obama's saying he's going to reduce the military. I hear a lot of cadets in the various military schools are going to bail out, figuring if he's not going to pay them, why should they go on with their schooling? Have you heard that?
Haven't heard much of anything on that, but can't say that I would blame them if that's what they wanted to do. You know, I mean, it's one of those.
Before, I was going to ask you about the
Oh, I like this. Yes.
challenge coin.
Yes. Okay.
This is a current phenomenon.
Yeah. So I was introduced to this. He's got a National Guard coin, and if you ever go into, say, a BX, if you ever frequent any military bases and you go into, say, an Army base or Air Force base and you go to a BX, you'll find these available for sale. They're coins. And it's a custom in the Air Force. It's called the challenge coin. And basically, the point of the challenge coin is it's esprit de corps kind of thing. If you're out with a group of military service members and say you're at a bar, you can take your challenge coin and drop it. And as soon as you hear that distinct, I'm going to do it, and hopefully not everyone in here has a coin. But when you drop it, everyone that's affiliated with the service has to produce their coin and drop it. The guy that doesn't have his coin is the guy that's on the hook for the round. So, so it's a very important piece of equipment to have with you when you're temporary duty. I showed Ed. I showed Ed my coin that I carry with me. It's part of my uniform, and this is my kangaroo pouch, if anyone knows what that is. This is the very first coin that I got 19 years ago. It's
Used.
Yeah, it's starting to fade a little bit. So yeah, I got that when I was in Charleston as a young maintainer, and I'll save it forever in my pouch.
A little history on Westover during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. They were quite active.
Oh yeah. There's a tremendous amount of air traffic going through. It was
A lot of troops
phenomenal.
went through
Yep.
and cargo.
Yep. It was essentially a main operating base. A young officer is working late at the Pentagon one evening. As he comes out of his office about 8 p.m., he sees a general standing by the classified document shredder in the hallway, a piece of paper in his hand. "Do you know how to work this thing?" the general asks. "My secretary's gone home and I don't know how to run it." "Yes, sir," says the young officer, who turns on the machine, takes the paper from the general, and feeds it in. "Now," says the general, "I just need one copy." Technology. Gotta love it. Well, I want to thank you all. It's my honor and privilege to be able to speak before you. Thanks to Leslie for inviting me over.
Gary, we want to thank you for joining us, and with this, we'd like to present you with a little plaque of thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
And please, come back again.